And you're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting as the Crime and Disorder Committee on Thursday the 11th of March 2021. My name is Councillor Vanessa Bell and I'm the Chairman of this committee. This meeting is held under new regulations which came into effect on 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation, and there are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please can I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting is being hosted remotely, streamed live and recorded, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the hands up function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating a wish to raise a point of order or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for questions or any other purpose. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn on your microphone. Now, if I may ask officers and other speakers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, please, starting with Mr. Holmes.
Good evening, members. Richard Holmes, Director of Service Delivery.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Clark.
Good evening, members. Spencer Clark. I'm the Community Safety Manager at Maldon District Council. Thank
you, Mr. Clark. You're fairly faint. I don't know if you could turn your volume up a little bit. Possibly. Chief Inspector Scott Haynes.
Good evening, members. Chief Inspector Steve Scott Haynes, Chelmsford and Maldon District Commander.
Good evening and thank you for joining us, Chief Inspector. Miss Bird.
Good evening, members. Tara Bird, Committee Clerk for this evening's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Bird. I believe we have Inspector Thirstable here as well. Sorry.
Good evening, I'm Inspector Thurston, CPT Inspector. That's all right, took over a few months ago. I'm just here really to sort of listen and see what's going on.
Thank you for joining us, Inspector Thurston. Are there any other officers present?
Yes. Good evening, members. Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Good evening, Mr. Dodson.
Good evening, members. Damien Geller, Lead Specialist Community Service Delivery.
Good evening, Mr. Geller. Anybody else? OK, before I call on the clerk to take the roll call of committee members, can I ask those councillors in attendance to introduce themselves, please?
I don't think we've got any, Chairman.
Oh, have we not, Miss Bird? That's makes a change. Thank you. Could you please now carry out a roll call of committee members to confirm who is in attendance?
Yes, of course, members. If you could just indicate you're here when I call your name, please. Starting with Councillor Bassinger, please.
Good evening. I'm present.
Good evening. Thank you. Councillor Miss Beale. Councillor Brian Beale. Councillor Bell. You're here.
I'm present, yes.
Councillor Boyce. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
Present, thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Present, Tara. Just, I lost you and I'm back again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Hello, hello, hello. What's all this then? It's Councillor Morris is here.
Thank you very much. That ends the roll call. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Tara. We're thin on the ground tonight. May I have the apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies been received from Councillor Dewick. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tara. Which brings us on to item 3, the minutes of the 22nd of October 2020 meeting. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of October 2020, found on pages 5 to 10, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. If you wish to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name now. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor
I believe that was Councillor Mays. Thank you. If any member wishes to raise any matter of accuracy, please use the hands up function to indicate. And I can't see any hands up, so I will take that as a no. Tara, can you advise if any other member has indicated a wish to speak, please?
No, Chairman, no, not aware of anyone else wanting to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Members, can we take these minutes by assent, please?
Yeah.
Are we happy to do so?
Agreed.
Yeah, that's fine, agreed.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So item 4, disclosure of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. If any member has any interest to declare, please use the hands up function now to indicate, and I will advise you to speak. Invite you to speak, sorry, tongue-tied this evening. No hands up. Tara, can you advise if any other members indicated a wish to speak?
Chairman, Councillor Morris got his hand up.
I do apologise, you haven't popped up on my screen, Councillor Morris. Go ahead.
How could you miss me, guys? Sorry, Chair. I did just wish to know: have we got anyone from the Democratic Alliance Group in tonight?
Tara, if you can confirm, I don't believe we have, Councillor Morris.
No, Chairman, I don't believe we have either. No.
No, Councillor Boyce, no, Councillor Jewick.
No,
Thank
Chairman.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Item 5, public participation, and I can advise that we have
just
not...
before you move on, Councillor Fleming's got her hand up. Thank you.
I do apologise. I don't seem to be getting the hands up on my computer tonight, so I do apologise. Tara, if you could actually advise me if anybody does, because they're not showing on my laptop. Yes, Councillor Fleming, I do apologise.
That's all right. Chair, I was just looking at the minutes, and actually I think the committee, we've had a meeting since 22nd of October, haven't we?
We have had a meeting.
So yes, the minutes here are 22nd of October. I can't remember, was it Feb or January? I can't remember.
Chairman, can I assist?
Yes,
yeah,
please,
that was
if you
the last
would.
meeting of the
okay.
The overview script has met since then, but that was the last meeting of the crime and disorder.
Sorry.
Of course it was. Thank you very much, Tara. Thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Fleming. Oh yeah, your hand popped up then finally, just when you were about to pop it down again. Okay, so yeah, we have not received any submissions from members of the public. So that brings us on to item number 6, Maldon District Community Safety Partnership update. So this is found on pages 11 to 50 of your agenda pack, and in a moment I will call on the officer to present this item. Members, a reminder, if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the hands up function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. So if I could hand over to you, please, Mr. Clark, that would be lovely.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have provided an agenda item in advance of the meeting, but as discussed at the Chairman's briefing, to make the topic slightly more interesting, I'm going to share a presentation with members, which will be similarly aligned to the actual committee report. If you just bear with me for 1 second.
Thank you. And thank you for your report, Mr. Clark. Thank you for that.
Hopefully members will be able to see this. Okay. Is that sharing okay, everyone?
It is.
Brilliant. Okay. First step's done then. Thank you. So I'll introduce myself first. My name's Spencer Clark. I'm the Community Safety Manager at Maldon District Council. And I've just got a few slides to show you some of the work which the partnership's been delivering in the last year or so. So I'll move on to the next slide. I know some of the elected members are relatively new to this, so I thought it'd be useful just to explain about the Community Safety Partnership and what the statutory duties of the partnership are. So firstly, the reason we do this is because of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, and the partnership isn't just Maldon District Council and Essex Police, who's here tonight. So the other responsible authorities are people like Health, so Mid Essex CCG, Probation Service, or the National Probation Service or Essex Community Rehabilitation Company, Essex Fire and Rescue Service, and Essex County Council as well. So members can invite any of those actual responsible authorities along to these sessions for scrutiny. And on other occasions, we've had some really interesting topics from probation and health delivered in the past. So just to flag that up, one of our statutory duties each year is to produce what's called a strategic assessment, and that is getting all of the information from all of those statutory partners together to assess the crime needs of Maldon District and how we can deliver against those. And what more importantly it does, it enables us to deliver some priorities each year. And these priorities are agreed by all of those responsible authorities. And from that, we produce what's called a partnership plan, which is in the appendices for members to view, and the necessary financial monitoring of that plan. When we talk about community safety, it's not just about crime. What we also look at is public perceptions and public opinions, because sometimes people can feel unsafe, and it's our role to try and tackle that. And we also have a duty to face the public, and as most of the members know, we tend to do this as part of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's public event as well. So it's usually the Police Commissioner, the District Commando, myself and some of the other partners. And last year's one was a really good event because it enabled to get out to a much wider audience by using the Zoom and a Facebook Live link. Other duties are we have to do 2 presentations a year to overview and scrutiny. This is one of them. The other one was done in October, and there's also another range of things which we work around, like the things like preventing violent extremism, domestic abuse, and modern day slavery and human trafficking. And a lot of the work we do nowadays is very much focused around the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014. So just back to our priorities, which are highlighted on page 11 of the actual report. And how we come about these. So these priorities are what we used last year, 2020-21.
Sorry, can I just, sorry,
Yep,
I
yes,
do apologise,
yeah.
Mr. Clark. You're still on slide number 1.
All right, has that not moved on then?
Slide showing.
No difference?
No.
It's very strange.
Do you want me to put it up, Spencer?
Yeah, do you mind, Tara?
Yeah, if you stop sharing your screen, I'll put mine up.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Tara. Thank you. Sorry, I'm smiling because we discussed, Spencer, the potential of this happening just
Right.
before the meeting. So,
has that made any difference?
Tara, as ever, is
No.
ready.
Yeah, if you can just stop sharing, and then I can. And there.
Oh, Councillor Anne Beale has just joined the meeting. Welcome, Councillor Beale.
Hi, I've been here about 5 or 10 minutes. But
you've just popped up.
Anyway.
Sorry about this, guys. My whole system's sort of crashing here. Right.
We seem to be having some technical issues, members and officers, tonight.
Right, is that unshared my screen now?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
There we go. Is that better?
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Clark, I think.
Okay, right. Apologies about that. So, so yeah, just finished on the statutory duties. If we go to the next slide, then please, Tara. And just talking about the priorities and how we decide these priorities each year is by the strategic assessment. So we look at lots of different crime types to try and deliver against that. The ones we've got at the moment, you see, are tackling crime and reducing reoffending, driving down antisocial behaviour in public places, identifying and supporting vulnerable people, and some of the other sort of work which we do in different areas. Right, I'm just having to amend what I've got on the screen here because it's not actually showing properly right. So I'm doing it from my desktop now. So and the other one we've got is increasing confidence in identifying and reducing rural crime, and the other one around promoting and road safety and challenging irresponsible driving. So next slide, please, Tara. What I thought would be useful to do for members is to try and just do a little bit of a horizon scanning about what's coming in the future, and more importantly, what the impact of COVID-19 has had on the world of community safety. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about crime because Chief Inspector is going to talk about that at a later date, but areas where we have seen increases, and these were expected increases, around domestic abuse, lots of people being locked up in the same household and not being able to move in the lockdown measures except in extreme cases. Increases in an antisocial behaviour, and that's probably more down to people becoming less tolerant with their neighbours, as you can imagine. So we've certainly seen issues around that. Other areas where we're also beginning to see. Sorry, that's it. Apologies, my screen's going a bit funny at this end. Other areas where we also begin to see some worrying concerns around mental health, and particularly around the emotional health and well-being of young people. So through my role with Mid-Essex Children's Partnership Board, we're certainly doing a lot of work around that at the moment. Other areas are increased alcohol consumption. Whilst people aren't going to pubs, there's a lot of drinking going on at home. Been lots of pressures on people, whether it's through work, whether it's through homeschooling, etc., and things like that.
Sorry, so Spencer, we've lost presentation again. I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but we're all watching ourselves now, and your presentation was far more interesting.
Sorry, Chairman.
No offence, members. I'm sure you will agree.
I'll pause for a second. I'll have a quick drink of water while Tara's putting the screen back up. Thank you, Tara. Much appreciated.
No problem.
So, as I was saying about some of the areas which the impact have been, there's been quite a lot of increase in scams. So we've been doing a lot of work with our Neighbourhood Watch about notifications around that. Conspiracy theories, lots of things going on. I mean, the world's gone slightly strange when you think about what's been happening, particularly in other countries, but lots of conspiracy theories around vaccines, for example. And there's been a bit of an increase in domestic extremism. You know, we've been in lockdown for a year now. People have been locked down for a year, particularly young people are accessing extreme material online, and there have been cases of young people being radicalised as a result of that. So there's lots of things we need to keep an eye on as a result of COVID, and some of this will be years to come before we actually see the impact of some of them. I thought it'd be useful to flag up to members 3 bills which are coming in the coming year. So the Domestic Abuse Bill 2020, that actually comes in this year. I think has royal assent soon, so we don't know the exact duty, but the duty for local authorities will be strengthen the duty to protect victims of domestic abuse for all statutory agencies. So I think one of the areas it might come to Maldon District Council will be around safe accommodation. and there has been some funding allocations to both Essex County Council and all of the districts around safe accommodation. So hopefully that will put us in good stead for the future. Another duty which will be coming in probably in 2022 now is the serious violence duty. So statutory agencies, of which Maldon District Council will be one of them, will have a duty to have serious violence as a priority. You already know we've got violent crime as a priority, and there'll be opportunity. What we'll have to do is engage and share information with partners. I mean, I'm not sure what difference that will make to Maldon because we've been doing it for a long time anyway. We already work really closely with the Essex Violence and Vulnerability Unit, and we've been sharing A&E data with Broomfield Hospital for about 6 or 7 years now. So, but that will become a duty, and there will also, I think it was only announced a couple of days ago about the serious violence reduction orders will be coming in. Finally, on this page is the protect duty. So consultation started on the protect duty a couple of weeks ago, and the consultation closes in around about, I think it's the 3rd or 4th of July this year. So what that's about, it's really what's going to be coming out of the Manchester inquest. So it's going to be how we look after and protect our public and crowded places going forward. So that's going to be an opportunity. Next slide, please, Tara. Just saying a little bit about how the partnership works and the structure of it. So we work very closely with Essex Police. The Community Safety Partnership Hub's been going since March 2019. I'm sitting in at the moment, so that's where I am. I'm working out of the hub at the moment as we speak. And we have what we call monthly partnership meetings with the wider group. So all of the other groups, like the other agencies which support us, have a tasking meeting. So in the hub, we have the community policing team. We also have the Essex Violence and Vulnerability Unit. And what we're looking to do is introduce other partners into the hub at a future date. So people like the youth service, people we have day-to-day sort of workings with. That works really, really well, and it's made a massive difference to the way community safety partnerships work. In Maldon, we have the local response team. So the 24/7 response team have been based at Maldon District Council since October 2018. When the police station closed, and that works really well, and we're looking to get more of a community policing footprint into the offices in the near future. We have quite a lot of forums with schools, so we work with schools really closely, we work with our social landlords really closely, and we have forums around mental health and neighbourhoods and communities. So we have really good links with our communities and neighbourhoods. Another area where we've seen a really improvement is the work we do with social care. So this afternoon I've been on a 2-hour call with social care, looking at some of the vulnerable areas of the district, and the work we do with the youth offending teams and the youth service. Thought it would also be useful to give members an idea and a flavour of all of the other meetings which we attend, and this is just a small amount of them. So Safer Essex, I'm the vice chair of Safer Essex, so that's the umbrella for community safety across the whole of Essex, where all of the partners meet and look at strategies and sign off some of the policies. At a more local level, we have the Essex Community Safety Network, the Prevent Board, which I also sit on. MACE is Missing and Child Exploitation. So this is where we consider high risk young people, and more importantly, what measures we put in place to protect them. The BAP is the Behaviour and Attendance Partnership. That's where we look at young people on the cusp of offending. So rather than putting them into sort of special measures, we look at things like managed move to other schools first. That works really well. As I explained before about Mid-Essex Children's Partnership Board, I'm sort of vice chair of that group. That's where we look at the health-related outcomes for young people. So loads of work going on around mental health for young people at the moment. And a few of the slightly more diverse ones, Eastern Sigsy, which is a member of the Special Interest Group in Countering Extremism. So I've been doing a lot of work around that at the moment, and some of the influences which come into Essex and things like Safeguarding Adults Board. But there's many more meetings which the groups actually work alongside. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Tara. So what I wanted to do is just flag up only a few of the sort of works we've been doing this year. And I think one of the real ones is really useful to explain to members about this one was a Crucial Crew. So we've been delivering Crucial Crew for years now. It's usually been a face-to-face contact, but we've made the decision this year it's going to be difficult getting into schools. And it's not just Maldon's going to have those problems. So Claire and my team had to think about other ideas, what we could do. We're looking to tackle the main sort of issues again, like exploitation. And what we decided to do this year, we've commissioned a drama company called Tick Box Productions, and they're going to deliver a recorded drama on to young people. And we're talking about year 6, so it's a transition year when young people move from primary to secondary education. And it's going to have a interactive breakout session. So what will happen is the schools will have this material, the 45-minute drama, in advance, and then they'll view that a day or the morning of that particular session. And then in the interactive session with the workshop, they'll be with the actors and they'll have the opportunity to change the ending of the story, which will make it truly interactive with young people. So, you know, it'll be what would happen if the person said this, what would happen if they wanted to speak to the teacher. So we're really pleased about that. And we've actually got a Maldon teacher who's writing a lesson plan for it. And it's to complement the VVU's e-learning module, which went live yesterday. So professionals and teachers can now learn about exploitation through the e-learning module. So initially, when we looked at this, it was just Maldon and Chelmsford where I work as well. And then we spoke about it to all the other community safety partnerships in Essex. They effectively bit our hands off. So we've got 10 of the CSPs in Essex interested in it now, and it's going to potentially go out to 16,000 students by the end of July. So it's a really good news story for Maldon. One of the other things we're working on as we get into secondary education for year 7 and 8 is a project we're working on with Story Lab, which is part of Anglia Ruskin University, the Cambridge campus, where we're going to be looking to deliver an immersive virtual reality experience for young people around exploitation. So again, that's a really interesting bit of work. We hope to have it complete by September for the new academic year. So again, just to highlight a couple of the projects we're doing there. So from the next slide, please, Tara. I highlighted in the pack some work we've done around domestic abuse. We've done, when I say we, Claire done a session for the Parish Clerks Forum about a month ago because they're really keen to learn about what services were available. I put Claire's 4 slides into one slide here. So just an idea of how people can access the services through the campus and what our duties are. What it is useful to point out, and I know some of the members here tonight have actually attended the training, was we've been delivering the J9 training to staff and elected members. And we've also now, on the 30th of March, got a community J9. So if any members of the community want to learn and gain awareness around domestic violence, that's available to them now. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Tara. Okay, this slide is just to highlight some of the other projects we've been doing. You're all familiar with our community engagement officers and what an excellent role they do in the district. True Cam is one of the projects they do where they do speed enforcement over and above what the police actually do. That's been really good. I've been doing this for a number of years now. The old camera's getting a bit old now, so the partnership has agreed to fund a new high-tech camera out of their reserves. So they'll be getting a new present to do some added enforcement in the next financial year. But they also do an excellent job working with other agencies. So people like Essex Police Rural Engagement Team, the Environment Agency, they do some joint working with the Youth Service, and they also do the Just Play Football at the Plume School and then Southminster at some nights. So that's just a bit about the community engagement officers. At the last scrutiny meeting, I streamed live from the CCTV control room, if you recall. That comprehensive system went live on the 1st of July, monitored at the Chelmsford CCTV control room. And you'll see that from the figures I put in the actual report, there's actually been some really, I think we've had over 70 incidents now, which has enabled various incidents, but it's not just been about crime. It's also been about protecting and finding missing persons. We've monitored river levels through storm surges. So it's been really useful for lots of reasons, and also doing things like pedestrian counts and traffic counts in the high street, which has enabled us to look at how we can reopen the high street in a safe and appropriate manner. One thing we're looking to introduce, and I know Damien Geller's on the call tonight as well, who's been doing a lot of the work around this, is the introduction of a public space protection order for Maldon Prom, Hive Quay, the High Street, and Burnham Riverside Park. We are in the consultation stage for this, so we're looking to how we can detract the use of alcohol in the parks and drugs, particularly nitrous oxide canisters. So that public space protection order, the consultation should hopefully start in the next week or so. It is a 6-week consultation period, and I do urge everyone to have their say on that. So it's something that we're looking to introduce, but realistically, if you look at the timeframes in place, because once we finish consultation, it has to go through quite a few other processes. It'll probably be looking at around about early autumn before it could go into place. Another useful project which I thought would be nice, because it's worth flagging up, because again, this is a first for Maldon, and it's cool eyes on this morning with some of our other partners. That is a piece of work which we've done with the Design Council, and we produced a screening tool in Maldon for young people. So again, it's year 6, and it's to assess the emotional well-being of young people in their transition year from primary to secondary education. That's something where the Plume School piloted for us last year, and it had some really good results, because as you can imagine, a lot of young people go under the radar, and by having this screening tool, it's only 4 questions, but if people score 12 or below on this screening tool, and this has been academically tested, it's a useful place for an intervention where the secondary school can do additional work with that young person at the transition year. So that's the first for Maldon, which the meeting this morning, we're looking to roll that out across the whole of Essex, hopefully in the next, hopefully this year, but we'll see whether it's achievable to do that. The only other thing I was going to say is about a lot of the multi-agency work we do. I know at the last meeting I gave a good talk about the safe, well and secure work we've done in Burnham, and this actually leads in quite nicely to a very short video which I'm going to show you around the tri-party work which the police, ambulance service and fire are piloting in the Dengie Peninsula. So Tara, if you could go on to the next slide, and hopefully the video will play, which is self-explanatory, and then we'll move into Mr. Scott Haynes' presentation and take questions at the end of both presentations. Thank you, Tara.
While we're waiting, I am aware that a number of members are experiencing internet issues this evening and dropping in and out of the meeting. So we are aware of this, and hopefully people will be able to catch most of the meeting. We've lost visuals. Brilliant.
Les is back. Thank you.
Les is He's very quiet though, Spencer.
He's very quiet.
The sound's up as high as I can put it, Chairman.
I wonder why we've not got sound on the video. Fortunately, we have subtitles though, so should we go ahead with the subtitles, members?
Yeah, I think I have to.
I think we will have to, won't we?
Yeah.
We get the music at the end. I'm very aware that anybody with a visual impairment tuning into the meeting won't have actually been able to access the content of that. So I'm hoping that they will be able to access it somehow elsewhere.
Chairman, we can put a link on the website for people if they're interested. We can do that.
That would be super. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. So thank you very much, Mr. Clark. That was very, very interesting. Lots of things that appeal to my social worker's head going on there. But yeah, and also I'm a great fan of multi-agency joined up working as well. There's too much silo working going on. So excellent. Members, we're going to move straight to Inspector Scott Haynes' presentation now, and then take questions at the end to both Mr. Clark and Mr. Scott Haynes. Tara, do we then vote on them both at the end? Can that work, rather than voting on one now and then the other later on?
Chairman, you can do that. That's no problem. There is no voting required for Chief Inspector Scott Haynes.
Oh, there's
it's just for Spencer's report. Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much for that, Tara. So, yeah, members, if we can hear Inspector Scott Haynes, Chief Inspector Scott Haynes, sorry now, and then move on to questions at the end. Is that acceptable? I'll take that as a sense. So over to you.
Yes, that's fine.
Chief Inspector Scott Haynes.
Thank you. I'm having some dramas because my boss is trying to contact me and covering the whole of my screen.
Oh no!
Isn't it always the way? Timing is absolutely everything.
I think things are set to try us tonight.
I think so. I can see it now. Right. I have a presentation which I'm going to try and share my screen. But as a fallback, Tara, do you have that presentation if I get it horribly wrong?
I have the one that Spencer sent this afternoon. Yes, I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the moment I'm struggling to get it even to link in. Is there any chance I could ask you to put it up?
Yeah, of course, no problem. I'll share my screen.
A lot easier.
We are beset by the gremlins tonight, aren't we?
There we go, Chairman.
Thank you. Excellent.
Right, thank you very much. Right, so good evening again. I am Chief Inspector Steve Scott Haynes. So obviously I was your community inspector up until a year and 5 days ago when I was promoted to the district commander role when Mr. Parker left us. So, Tara, can we have the next? Thank you. So I look after the local policing teams, otherwise known as the response teams, based at Maldon and at Chelmsford. I also have responsibility for the Maldon and Chelmsford community policing team, including the town centre team. They're based at this time in the community safety hub over at Chelmsford City Council. The community policing team work to the local priorities of the community safety partnership, as have been explained by Mr. Clark earlier. Those teams at this time, although based there, our longer term aim would be to bring our community team back to Maldon itself. That's one of the things that I've set and I would like to see put in place, and we're working on that at the moment. If I could have the next slide, please, Tara. So we work towards the force plan as set by the gentleman top right hand corner, our Chief Constable. This plan is set in the easiest way to look at it is the top 3 items: to help people, keep people safe, and catch criminals, or as the Chief Constable likes to say, catch baddies. With our main effort around victims, vulnerability, violence, and visibility. The 4 V's, as we call it, what we like to drill into our officers. If we are getting those 4 V's right, helping our victims, identifying and helping the vulnerable, dealing with violence, and being as visible as we can in our communities, we should be doing all of the right things to keep communities safe. And then that's split down into how we work and our priorities, but I won't go through those all individually. They're sort of what you would expect. So if we can get the next slide, please. Thank you. So the 7 policing priorities to protect Essex, which have been agreed through the PCC, are a more local, visible and accessible policing, crack down on antisocial behaviour, breaking the cycle of domestic abuse, reverse the trend in serious crime, tackle gangs and organised crime, protecting children and vulnerable people, and improve safety on our roads. Again, I think these priorities have been in for quite such a long time. Most people are fully aware of them. But if you look at those, they're almost exactly the same as our 4 V's: looking after victims, vulnerable, reducing violence, and being visible. So we're working towards what the PCC would like us to do. Police and crime, PFCC now, sorry. If we can get the next slide, please. So performance, this is the important bit. This is the bit you guys pay me to achieve. So crime at the moment in the Maldon area down by 4.9%, 184 less offences, which is rolling 12 months to February 2021. It's a similar trend to across Essex, and again, it's this constant thing. Maldon's a really safe place, so is Chelmsford a really safe place. We still have crime, and it's right that we report on it. Unfortunately, our antisocial behaviour, as we've all expected to happen, has risen significantly, predominantly down to our COVID breaches. Although high, again, it's similar as those across Essex. What I'd say again and again is that we have been, the people of Essex in general, but particularly Maldon, even more so than Chelmsford, have been particularly good at keeping to the COVID restrictions. It's been particularly well highlighted. Obviously, everybody's at home, so there's less opportunity to commit crime. Certainly, a reduced nighttime economy, reduction in dwelling burglaries, down something like 36%, 100 offences less year on year, which is great. That's 100 people whose houses haven't been invaded, which we like to see. There are areas of concern. Certainly, sexual offences have increased significantly. So has violence without injury, stalking and harassment linked to domestic abuse. We've seen a steady increase in our hate crime. A real frustration, that one. It seems to be centered around very minor areas with repeat suspects as opposed to victims, if that makes sense. So the repeat person doing it, and Kelly's team are doing some really good work on that to try and put some things in place to stop them from being able to do it. Now, although we got percentage rates really high, our actual numbers are always going to be very, very low, and any change looks significant. That in some ways helps me, because if it's a reduction, it looks really, really good. But if it goes the other way, it looks really, really bad. But it's normally very small numbers. Future use of Power BI, so business intelligence. Power BI, I've seen this new Power BI. I'm on something called the Use of Force Board for the whole of Essex Police, and we got to see this in action for the first time. It gives me information on stop and search, everything from ethnicity to breakdown of gender, to ages, the places it's happening, and for the first time I can break it down between Chelmsford and Maldon, something we've been trying to do for years. Unfortunately, I can't at the moment share it because it isn't fully online, but as soon as it's fully online, when I come to this panel and the crime panel, I'll be able to share that really good information. Yeah. Tara, can we get the next slide, please? So, impact of COVID on policing. I've been a police officer for 20 years. I've never policed like this. It's the strangest thing we've ever had to deal with. For us, the operational name is called Operation Tala. Massive demand on patrolling areas for around compliance. It's been really strange for us because guidance and laws have changed significantly, really, really quickly, and trying to keep our officers fully up to speed with what can and can't be done has been really difficult, even to the point of normally when a new law comes in, it can be challenged in courts, etc. We haven't even got to the point where all of these things have been challenged in court. So I have no doubt some of these things will change. Overall, our crime has reduced during the pandemic. As lockdowns eased, we know that crime is going to rise. We absolutely know that will happen. We need to ensure as we come out of lockdown, we have these effective responses to the reopening of the town centres, licensing breaches. We know at the last release of the lockdown, we had a number of breaches around some licensed premises. Kelly Thurston and her team did some phenomenal work, closed down 2 licensed premises really, really quickly, one of those in the Maldon district, to stop these things going on. Supporting our vaccination sites, that's setting up across the district, been quite a big job for us, and supporting obviously our victims of domestic abuse with all of that partnership work that Mr. Clark's already discussed with us. So we can go next slide, please, Tara. Thank you. So what's our local community policing team structure look like? So Detective Inspector Kelly Thurston, taken over from the last chap. I don't really remember him. We've got 3 sergeants attached to the team. PS David Woods and Temporary Police Sergeant Matt Dolby, who run the community policing side of it, with 9 PCs and 24 PCSOs. Sorry, 2 to 4 PCSOs. And the town team run by Graham Thomas with 8 PCs and 4 PCSOs, who cover Chelmsford City Centre, Maldon Town Centre and Southwood and Ferris Town Centre. That is 2 officers at Maldon, 2 at Southwood and Ferris, and 4 over at Chelmsford. Also in the team, we've had a growth of our community child and young persons officers from 2 to 4. These are the officers that are working directly with our youth offending teams, going directly into secondary schools, liaising with the pastoral staff there, and working directly with children. 2 MPLOs, which are our missing persons liaisons officers. So these are civilian workers that help us where we get a missing person that, say, has repeatedly goes missing, particularly youngsters. The MPLOs will work with social services and with schools, etc., to try and put something around that person to help them stop going missing. Next, 2 CSEOs, and I always get this wrong: community No, I'm going to get it wrong. Kelly, help me out. You remember what they're called?
Sorry, I had to get off of mute. Community support engagement officers.
Thank you. I always get it wrong. So we have one for
Chelmsford.
Say again.
Go wisely.
So we have one for Chelmsford and now one for Maldon specifically, PC Rosie Smith. Her role is to look at all of that community engagement stuff through social media, through meetings and through newspapers, getting our newsletter out and basically giving as much information as we can out to the community, show what we're doing. And one SIM PC. SIM is basically this officer works directly with the health service, and we look at people who suffer from a mental health disorder, which means that they constantly call police or call ambulance. We then put a plan around that person to help them break that cycle of contacting emergency services, so that we don't use lots of resources when we're not really able to assist that person. So if we can get the next slide, please, Tara. So our recruitment campaign, behind me, you will see Fit the Bill, value difference, lots of photographs of some of the people that we have looked to recruit within policing. Really successful campaign to look at dispelling the myths about you have to be a certain person to be a police officer, usually white, male and British. You know, that's kind of the thing that most people think. What we've tried to show is that we value difference, predominantly focusing on the 9 strands of difference from personality, age, culture, background, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, language, education and faith, with the aim of increasing the diversity of our own of Essex Police. All of the figures that we get about diversity are really, really difficult because they're based on the census, which obviously we know is exactly 10 years out of date. So hopefully with the new census, we can show that actually we're more diverse than we think we are, but we're looking into that. So basically that campaign has won some national awards, and we have already seen that we are growing with our applications to almost 10% of our applicants being from an ethnic minority, when we only have 3% currently as BAME officers, which is really, really good to see it improving as we go. Tara, can we get the next slide? Right, so our policing tactics, obviously the community policing responsible for specific areas. I won't say beats because we don't use the term beats anymore, to enable officers to take control of local impacts, being visible and responding to demand when appropriate, and engaging with our communities through social media at the moment where appropriate. But like everybody else, we can't wait to come out of lockdown so we can get face to face again. It's always better to see a cop face to face or a PCSO. We're trying to be more accessible, street meets, coffee with cops, all these things that you've seen before. My local newsletter that I've been sending out now for 3 or 4 months, which so far has been really well received. Obviously, COVID's been our big challenge, but Facebook Live has been a real surprise for us. We get a lot of people who probably wouldn't normally attend meetings come on and ask us some questions. So that's really good to see. And looking to support our rural areas, well, working with our partners more through Farm Watch, Active Citizens, Rural Engagement Team, Neighbourhood Watch, which we really need to push a bit more. We're not quite there at the moment. Over in Chelmsford, we've got a really strong Neighbourhood Watch that's worked really well for a number of years, and I know that the chair of Chelmsford is more than willing to assist us to build that up. And Les, who you saw earlier on from the tripartite, is going to assist us with that as well over on the Maldon side to try and build that neighbourhood. And there you go now, isn't it? Always away. Community Safety Engagement Officers, written in full, so I remember it. PC Rosie Smith is yours for this area. So can we get the next slide, Tara? So policing operations. So we're committed to the Community Safety Hub, joint tasking and problem solving approach. The biggest part of that for me, and the biggest thing that I want to achieve, will be to bring a community policing team back into Maldon, based in Maldon. Although our community policing team officers come out to Maldon and they spend as much time in Maldon as they do in Chelmsford, I really want them to be right in the hub of Maldon itself. And I know that Richard is working really hard with our estates team at the moment to try and improve the footprint over at Maldon Council so that we can get more of our officers here. Obviously, violent crime and drugs, we still have our Operation Sceptre and our Operation Overwatch, where we try to use our stop and search powers to detect drugs and weapons, obviously in the correct way, using Go Wisely, Councillor Morris, so that we do that right. Vulnerability, we look at through our Operation Enlightenment through our schools, and Henderson through transport hubs. That also gets us going and speaking to people like taxi drivers, hoteliers, so that we can identify vulnerable people coming into the area and give hoteliers, taxi drivers, people like that, the tools they need to actually pick up the phone and tell us, because they see these things and aren't always sure how to progress it. And obviously we'll look at any local issues through specific operations which are linked to that area or a particular problem that's identified to us, whether that's drug dealing, whether that's vehicle problems through ASB, whether that's a prolific shoplifter turns up in Maldon, it could happen. So we'll look at any operation and try to progress it. Tara, I think that was the last slide. There you go.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector, and also thank you very much for providing the police numbers figures for us earlier on. I know they were quite difficult to get hold of, so many thanks for those.
Chair, as soon as I can get hold of the actual recruit numbers, which as of yet haven't come through, I'll ensure that they come to the board so that you're aware of them.
Superb. Thank you very much for that. Really helpful and very positive news about local team in Maldon. So you know, looking optimistic, and we really appreciate, I think I speak for everyone when I say how much we appreciate the difficulties and challenges of responding to COVID and the changes in the way policing happens that you've had to make. So with, as he said, no notice and no kind of lead-in period at all. So
it's been an interesting time.
I'm sure it has. Yes, that's an old Chinese proverb, I think, isn't it? May you live in interesting times. But so members, now if I can go to the recommendation that members review and comment on the current progress of the initiatives undertaken by the partnership. That was what Spencer talked about to date, and note the strategic priorities for 2021-22. Would anyone like to second that motion? Don't all speak at once.
Councillor Fleming seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. So now if I can take questions to both Chief Inspector Scott Haynes and Mr. Clark. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Fleming, I can see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions for Spencer about the public space protection order. I wanted to know what sort of questions the consultation asks, because I haven't seen it. Is it on the council website? Yeah, I just would like to know a bit more about that, because I understand that they've been around for a while. So my question is why now? And what sort of, because I understand it's for a geographical area, and what sort of things will be, banned, if you like?
Good questions.
Okay, yes. So public space protection orders. So the rules changed a few years ago. So we used to have what's called a designated public place order for the promenade, but it never extended further up into the high street and other areas. So the whole purpose of the consultation, which I've been working with Damien Giller and Leanne Pateman on, is that everyone will have an opportunity to comment. In the consultation, there'll be a map of the area shown. We'll be writing to all of the relevant partners involved, as well as retail, such as pubs, all of the shops in the high street, all of the traders in the prom. So everyone will be consulted. Everyone will have the opportunity to say things. What it will do, it will give the police and the council more powers to tackle people who are drinking in antisocial behaviour, if that's such a word. We're not looking to target people who are sitting on the prom having their bottle of champagne with a few strawberries. It's when they start hitting each other on the head with the bottles, etc. Is when we need to start making that intervention. And also particularly since in the first lockdown, when it first eased in the summer, there was days when Promenade Park was awash with nitrous oxide canisters. So it's something we've used effectively before in Chelmsford, where we used it for 4 years running at the V Festival. So we only actually had a public place protection order in for 2 weeks running, just to prevent drug use during the festival. So it can be used, in a proportionate manner. We're not looking to sort of challenge people on their, what we just want is to people to behave in an appropriate manner, and so that everybody can enjoy those areas, everyone can enjoy the high street, everyone can enjoy the prom, but it'll just give us those extra powers to deal with it. So that it can be used in other manners. I know I think Damien Geller's got his hand up, who's been leading this. So, Chair, would it be okay if I invite Damien to say a few words about this particular project?
You took the words out of my mouth there, Mr. Clark. So, Mr. Geller, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, councillors. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me properly. I know that there's been some problems with the internet. So yes, just really to come back on what Spencer's been saying, the public space protection order is literally a set of conditions or rules on a given area. We all know that. We've got a defined map at the minute, and the purpose of the consultation is to, one, check that the conditions are right for the area, because we come up with the conditions based on policing evidence in terms of drug use in a particular area and alcohol related nuisance in a particular area. So that's how it helps define the map. If it's felt that the map needs to be extended or shortened at the end of the public consultation period, then that's what will happen, because we use the consultation to form the public space protection order going forward. And once in place, it lasts for a period of up to 3 years. That's the intention with this one. Most large town centres have a public space protection order of some sort, and it's not meant to be the immediate go-to to solve antisocial behaviour. It's like an additional tool to be used to control antisocial behaviour in an area. So in terms of alcohol consumption, consuming alcohol, as has been said, isn't antisocial. It's when the behaviour surrounding it starts to become antisocial. So if someone is becoming antisocial because they're drunk, then we can ask them to surrender their alcohol. If they refuse to surrender the alcohol, then it becomes something that we can choose to enforce against. And the enforcing partners are either the police or the council officers, certain council officers. And as I said, it's really just to try and control and encourage better behaviour. Some of the other antisocial behaviour powers we got take time to embed, and the idea with this is it's more of a quick hit to try and stop the behaviour dead in its tracks before it becomes, a bit more established. And yes, the other does relate to illegal drugs and psychoactive substances, which includes nitrous oxide canisters. As we all know, the issue with nitrous oxide canisters is that they're quite cheap, easily available, and you can buy. They're legal to buy because obviously they're used for cooking, but they get used for other purposes, and that's when they become a problem. And so the idea about being able to enforce against it is something I think that we need in our town centre areas. So yes, we've had some initial internal consultations. We're now ramping up to move to external consultation that'll last for 6 weeks. At the end of the 6 weeks, we gather all the results in. We'll be going through all of it to take on board everyone's comments, and then it will come back out in a finalised form for final notifications. And then it's the hard work of trying to get all the signage and the implementation in place, provided it's accepted.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you very much. And I know we have enormous problems with nitrous oxide canisters in Burnham and Riverside Park, so that'd be very helpful for us as well, I think. Councillor Fleming, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. That's great. Thank you.
Lovely. I will go to Councillor Morley first, followed by Councillor Bassinger and then Councillor Morris. So Councillor Morley, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just really an intriguing one. How do you cope with the scam calls and things like that? Probably to Spence, really. I get 1 or 2 people ask me, who do they report? Obviously report it to the police, but it must be a minefield. And how do you go about sourcing the source of the problem, really? Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. We've actually, I don't know if it's happened yet. We've actually got a training event for Neighbourhood Watch on scams in the very near future. So that's one of the areas we've been looking at. And I think one of the areas, we've all heard about the scams which have been coming about the vaccine and everything. People have been trying to charge elderly folk for so it is a minefield. There is I think there's a new unit at Essex Police is actually dealing with these sort of the business units dealing with a lot of the business scams, etc. But I know there is if this session hasn't happened, I know we had a booked-in session for Neighbourhood Watch, which is a training event on scams. So what I'll do is I'll try and share that with members so that they've got an opportunity to that. Because I know Claire and my teams was arranging that, so that if we can upskill all of the local coordinators and they can cascade that information onto other members of the public, that'd be really useful. But yes, you quite rightly said it's very fluid. The sooner you tackle one, there's another one around the corner, as you can imagine.
I don't know how you keep up with it, but I don't know how you start to even go where it comes from, because it's only a phone number, and these poor pensioners and people like that, or vulnerable people, are swallowed in with it, and it's so sad. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question really for Mr. Clark, I think. In your presentation, there was a line which was, I think it was conspiracy and domestic radicalisation. I mean, it kind of makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. I just wondered if you can define that and what that actually means.
So, as I explained as part of the discussion earlier, I sit on the SIGSI, which is the Special Interest Group in Counter Extremism, and when we instantly think about extremism, people tend to think about the Islamic influence towards it, which it has been over the years. But the risk to Essex, if you look at it, I mean, last week we had our counter-terrorism local profile, is other types of groups. Whether you can call them far right, you can call them civic nationalist type groups, but there's been a lot of issues in Essex. We've experienced some in Chelmsford. Epping have had quite a lot of issues around the Bell Hotel, etc., where the Home Office have been housing migrants in the Bell Hotel, and it seems to be causing lots of community tensions. So, like because we're in a lockdown situation, a lot of this information is put over the internet, over community Facebook groups, etc. So that's what I mean about domestic extremism. But one of the worrying things is how young, I mean, I'm not a lot of young men, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, are accessing quite extreme material online. And we only had an incident just after Christmas in Chelmsford where a young 17-year-old boy was arrested on neo-Nazi charges. You know, you don't expect, you know, well, I say you don't expect, you never expect it to happen in your particular town or village. So we know that's happening. We know there's more of an influence. You've got young people sitting at home bored in lockdown, you know, looking at information they shouldn't do. And in some circumstances, these people are becoming radicalized. So that's just when I say increase in domestic extremism. I mean, if you look at on a more international platform, if you look at someone, you know, like the QAnon group, you know, and the storming of the Capitol in the States recently, you know, that you look at that sort of information going around, but more importantly, and I had this discussion with the chair a few weeks ago about the psychological impact on those people who subscribe to these sort of conspiracy theories. It's having a massive impact. And Coventry University done quite a lot of studies on that, on how that can impact young people and the influence, not just young people, how it can impact on other people. So that's when I say about the sort of domestic extremism. I mean, things like conspiracy theories. I mean, a prime example is the vaccine. You know, the sort of information going out about the vaccine at the moment. If you look at it on the internet. I mean, I only watched a program on the BBC iPlayer the other night about how 4 professionals had sent videos to older folk telling them why they shouldn't take the vaccine. And you know, these are people who are either serving or suspended doctors now. You know, so that sort of information. And when we're trying to encourage as many communities, I mean, having the vaccine is a choice for people, don't get me wrong, but when we're trying to convince people, you know, particularly from some of our other types of groups. I mean, I speak to our independent advisory group where we have a really good attendance from the Jewish community, the Muslim community, Chinese community, but one of the groups who show quite a lot of mistrust in authority, particularly the government, is the Black African community. And a lot of them are saying that they do not want to take the vaccine because of mistrust. You know, so that's just an example of conspiracy theories, but there's lots going round. So I think it's just important that we keep an eye on what's happening locally, but also nationally on those sort of areas. So that's what we're doing as a part of that special interest group, to try and monitor such tensions, and more importantly, what sort of counter narrative you can have to those sort of discussions. So it's because sometimes staying quiet isn't the right thing to do. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what I'm trying to explain there.
Thank you, Spencer. And I know you and I had a discussion about how it is quite alarming the way that the far right is using COVID to radicalise people, particularly, as Spencer said, you know, young men. But and the vaccine misinformation, I understand completely mistrust amongst certain communities. I mean, there are certain communities who have in the past been experimented on, you know, and all kinds of horrific things have happened. So, you know, it's about educating people. I've had my first vaccine and there's no sign of the crocodile tail yet. So I think we're going to be okay there. So thank you very much. If I could go first to Councillor Morris, then back to Councillor Fleming again. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to quickly say that I would enjoy having a conversation with Spencer about the vaccine stuff. I think that the biggest mistrust that the vaccine brings is that it's got no liability for the manufacturers. Did you know that, Spencer?
No, I didn't, Councillor Morris, but I say
yeah, there's no liability for the manufacturers of the vaccine. And you know, obviously, I would expect you to tell me not to use a cab, for instance, if it wasn't insured, wouldn't you? So perhaps if there was some liability for the vaccine, there'd be a lot more people willing to take it. I'll get back to my original one. Going back to the PSPO. Thank you. But Spencer, mate, me and you're going to have a chat about that, because I can't wait to hear what your, what your tactics will be to try and talk me around common sense.
I was about to interject, Councillor Morris, that I suggest you take that conversation outside, but not in the way that other people might assume I mean that.
No. There'll be no fisticuffs between me and Spencer. We love each other too dearly. PSPOs. I would just like to know that once the PSPOs start coming into our district, are we going to be using private companies to basically get the penalty charge? I think it's a penalty charge notice in, isn't it? Is it a PCN? FPN that a PSPO would generate, and would that be by a private company that would be incentivized and have been accused of profiteering by issuing fixed penalty notices for the PSPOs? I mean, there's been some absolutely ridiculous PSPOs introduced by other councils. One of them, for instance, is a PSPO that people can't use the toilet for any length of time. They're asked to leave the toilets quickly and stuff like that. I mean, there's, I've got some other ones. There is, for instance, warnings issued for picking up casual labourers and stuff like that. Now, if we're going to use PSPOs, we need to make sure they're sensible, and are they going to be, enforced by private security companies and the like?
Spencer.
I agree. They need to be used in a proportionate manner. Most fixed penalty notices which are issued are paid to the council or the police quite promptly. I can't answer that question about private security companies being used to do collections. It's not something which, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. What I will say is where we've used them in Chelmsford, and we've had a PSPO in Chelmsford High Street for 6.5 years now, and again that is primarily around alcohol, but I think the public consultation is really important, because we have to listen to our public in Chelmsford, because one of the issues we have had in Chelmsford is around begging and aggressive begging. So we actually changed the wording following the public consultation for that. So it is important. The consultation stage is very important. But what we've tended to do is, like what rightly said, issue a warning first. Issuing a warning is always the first step, having that form of intervention, whether it be the police, whether it be our community engagement officers, whether it's even a chat with the youth service who were doing detached youth work in the park, for example. We shouldn't see it as a stick. We should see it as a positive intervention tool. And I think that's right, yeah. And we should only get to that stage of issuing fines in extreme cases, I think. So let's. I think Damien wants to come in there.
I was going to say, I think Damien wants to help you out here, Spencer. I think, Councillor Morris, before you come in, the key is to encourage as many people as possible to take part in the consultation, because my understanding is that will ask about the areas and the things you think should be covered by the PSPO. So make sure that as many people as possible in your ward take part in that consultation if you can. Damien, I'll come to you now, please.
Thank you. Just really to answer those queries. So the conditions that we chose are, if you like, standard conditions that you'll find within many PSPOs, because that type of behaviour does go on in town centres. I've applied for town centres in other areas, and yes, you're right. There's a whole host of conditions you can try and put in there. That's not the intention with this. It's literally to tackle bad behaviour, not to try and do anything sort of off the wall, if you like, or experimental. In terms of the fixed penalty notice, it'll literally just be the police and the CEO officers and the police and our own council officers. There won't be any external agents that we're bringing in for this.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Fleming, I see you have, is that a legacy hand or a new hand?
It is a new hand.
New hand. Go ahead, Councillor Fleming.
So I had a question for the Chief Inspector and then another one for Spencer. I wanted to ask the Chief Inspector, has the backlog in the courts had any impact on your work?
Right, so the directly, no, in that our cases are still going forward. We are still completing our files. They go off to CPS. CPS then push them up through the courts. It is meaning that it is longer before we're getting into court. I know that some of our really serious cases, talking to my colleagues in the major investigation teams, are looking sort of 12 months before they're going to get a court date. So there is going to be a backlog there, but that backlog is further down the line than my officers are dealing with. That being said, we did do an operation, I believe it was 2 months ago, I might be a little bit wrong on the timing, where we had to provide extra officers to the court to try and experiment where they were pushing more cases through very quickly. To allow the backlog to be reduced. There may be similar to that when we come out of lockdown. That had a direct impact on the community policing team because they had to provide an officer to be there all of the time during the court to do the running for the community, for the CPS, etc. But one officer for 1 week wasn't the biggest impact we've ever had.
Okay, thank you. And then my question to Spencer, you mentioned pedestrian counts and traffic counts from the CCTV. How extensive was that? Did you do it over a week and do you have that data?
Yes, the government issued particular times and dates when we were to do the pedestrian counts. So that information was supplied based on those particular days. I think there was Tuesdays and Saturdays and at certain times of the day. So it just gave them a sort of rich picture of how many people were on the high street at that particular time. So that's what that was, and we do have that data, which can be by all means, it's not sensitive in any way because it's, it doesn't identify anyone, if you see what I mean. So it will just be numbers, effectively. So other things we've been sort of looking at is vehicle flow movements, etc. And one of the other areas we're looking at is heavy goods lorries use at Market Hill. Was another area we're doing a survey for. So it's been quite useful because it's rather than it just when everyone thinks about CCTV, they think about crime and disorder all the time, but it can be really useful for other factors. I mean, I didn't expect to be monitoring a autumn storm surge on Hive Quay using CCTV, but just by putting a board up with the depths and everything, enabled us to do that. So rather than having an officer out at 2 o'clock in the morning checking it, we're able to do that and relay that information back to the Environment Agency.
Great, thank you, Spencer. So, sorry, Chair, are you going to do future traffic and pedestrian counts as well?
Yes, by all means. If that information, if the information is requested by either Maldon Council or Essex County Council Highways, we're more than happy to do that because it's a really genuine use for CCTV, isn't it? Because rather than paying someone to sit in a car with a little clicker doing it, we can either do that live or we can do it by retrieving the evidence which goes back for a calendar month. So yes, we can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Bassinger again and then Councillor Morley. Councillor Bassinger, please.
Chair, this is a question for the Chief Inspector, please. You said that we no longer use the word beat, but I mean, I sort of think that most people can see that there isn't really any visual presence on the streets. I just wondered.
Sorry, you're breaking up, Councillor Bassinger. It might be an idea if you turn your camera off and try again, because we didn't catch that.
Just I don't know, hear me out. Just wondering if there's any sort of any moves to get sort of a visual presence on the streets. Okay.
No, we're still not getting you, I'm afraid, Councillor Bassinger.
I better leave it there. I think my internet's so. I really do.
Yeah, no, I do apologise. I do apologise. We're not. I mean, perhaps you could, if you could email your question, and then I can make sure that it gets forwarded to the right person. Would that be okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morley, then Councillor Morris.
Yeah, thank you. Just in inquisitive one, really, to the Chief Inspector. Thank you. Was it noticeable with the lockdown, with burglaries as everyone's at home being in? And have you had any challenges with all the premises are in lockdown with vandalism or burglaries, all the pubs, factories, or not perhaps factories, but things being shut down and people breaking in out of interest? Thank you.
Yeah. So dwelling burglary of people's houses massively reduced because people are at home. That has seen a massive reduction. The only area of burglary that we have seen continue, not increase or decrease, but continue at its normal at the level we'd been seeing before lockdown, is what we call a millennium burglary, which is where a house is broken into specifically to take car keys and to take a vehicle. That has remained probably on a level, hasn't increased, hasn't decreased, but overall burglary has. And no, not really. We haven't really had business premises burgled to a higher degree.
It's amazing. It's the first thing I would have thought of.
You know, it's surprised us. It's the same as we really expected domestic assaults to skyrocket at times, and it hasn't. Any domestic assault is wrong, don't get me wrong, and we don't want any of them, but we really expected a massive increase that we didn't see. We know there are reporting issues around that, and we know that unfortunately abusers are still with their victims, which hopefully we'll see those victims coming forward once things have eased up a bit. But no, exactly the areas I would have expected, with an increase in criminal damage, an increase in people breaking into places like, you know, a warehouse, etc. No, really haven't seen that increase. So very surprising.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I'm going to you, and then I'm afraid I have a whole heap of questions for both Chief Inspector and Mr. Clark. So, Councillor Morris, to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to start off, I'd like to thank the Chief Inspector for his help over the past few weeks. You and your lads and lasses have been very, very professional. I thank you for that. I was just wondering, Chief Inspector, nationally there is quite a bit of a problem with the sickness and attendance of officers, both for stress-related and COVID. How is that impacting Essex Police and this district's policing?
Okay, so from the data that I've been able to get so far on this, on average we lose around 5 days per year per officer in Essex. Chelmsford and Maldon are on exactly the same level as that. At the moment, just slightly lower than the Essex average, but it's really tiny little bit lower. Yes, we have had issues. COVID has not been as big of an issue as we thought it would be. That being said, the one area where we did have a major problem some weeks ago, we had a whole shift hit at Maldon. So one of my local policing teams, the whole shift did test positive. Thank goodness they're all back to work. They're all well again and getting on with their job. Kelly Thurston, my CPT inspector, I picked the right week. I was on leave on the week this happened. So Kelly got to manage it all for me and put some really good work in to get a real deep clean done in the council offices and everything. So we have had a case where we've taken out a whole shift for one set of shifts, but we backfilled from Chelmsford. So hopefully the public didn't really see a difference in the policing over that period.
Well, it's lucky that the tests are only 7% accurate.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. And I do want to say, actually, Chief Inspector, I do want to offer my condolences for your Marine officer who we sadly lost to COVID. So condolences for that. That was very, very sad. So questions from my colleagues. First of all, I think this is to you, Chief Inspector. When are you going to install the emergency public telephone at the council offices? I understand this has been ongoing for some time.
It's in. I've waited so long to say that.
Oh, that's brilliant news. That's
it's there,
excellent
it's in
news.
place, and the council very graciously put in an extra piece of paving so that the public can go up there without getting damp feet as well. So yeah, it's in place. It has already been used a number of times. So yes, we're there at last. I can't believe I've said so much about a phone.
You
That's
didn't
fantastic.
tap on the window though.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. The next one is also for you. How successful have you been in addressing the public perception of no visible policing? Although you were pretty visible in Burnham last night. What measures have you introduced and will you introduce in the future to continue the improvements that have been made, and within what time frame? I know you've mentioned some of the initiatives that have been going on with, you know, things like Coffee with Cops, but I guess the COVID has put a stop to that. So what are you looking at?
Right, so Coffee with Cops certainly has stopped. We've done a lot of work around our social media footprint. Put my teeth back in. Footprint to try and increase getting some of the good news stories out, letting people know where we are. I've very deliberately asked the officers to take photographs of where they are and get that out on social media to physically show, because with all the will in the world, not everyone is going to see my officers when they're out, because that's just not what happens. We know that. We absolutely know that. So particularly using the social media platforms, I've asked them to take a photograph and take a photograph of the street name they're in. Take iconic locations within, whether that's Burnham, whether that's Maldon, so that we can show people we're actually physically there. Where we identify an issue, whether that's antisocial behaviour, whether that's drug dealing, when the officers are out there, again, it's showing we have been there, physically showing we've been there, where we can and where the member of the public is happy for us to, knocking on the door and saying we're here. And we don't get it right 100% of the time. We can't. I wish we could, but we will always be there. I've started putting out this newsletter, this monthly newsletter. Again, it's getting that out to a wider audience, because not everyone has social media.
That's true.
Giving some of the information around what we're doing and why we're out there. I'm trying to get some livery changes to our vehicles so that we can show that we are doing rural patrols as well as city patrols. I know that sometimes it can feel that Maldon is the sort of second best to Chelmsford, because Chelmsford's bigger. That is not how we
Burnham is third best, Chief Inspector.
Nowhere near third, Madam Chairman. You wouldn't allow me to do that.
I should hope so, indeed.
Getting our community team back out on the ground there. We've done a lot of work at Burnham Police Station and getting the Marine unit back there. And I know that Chief Inspector Darren Deeks has been really interested in making sure that the presence is felt there of the Marine unit, and we'll continue that. The tri-service through Les, obviously more of that. And lockdown, the release of lockdown, hopefully will take us away from some of those COVID duties to be back out there talking to people face to face again. I know the community guys miss that. I know the PCSOs miss that, and we want to be out there doing it. As we get more officers, we will build the size of the community team and get more people out there. I've said that from the day I arrived here, and I've always tried to push that. That's what we really want to do. Our last survey results that we did as Essex Police have shown a real increase in how the people of Maldon are seeing what we're doing. And for the first time year on year, I showed an increase right across the board. And that for me says, right, we're getting there, we're doing the right things. What I've always aimed for is that we do like a couple of percentage points, 1 or 2%, but keep it there all the way through. And that all went horribly wrong this time round because we had an increase of 10%. That means I've got to keep it up.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. And I have to say, I have noticed in Burnham over recent months, whether it's that there are fewer people around, I don't know, but I don't think so. I have noticed that there have been police patrols around. So thank you very much for that. Next one, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here, Chief Inspector, rather. Petty crime is on the increase, but residents continue not to report it as they say it's a complete waste of time as the police won't come to the scene or speak to the person who reported it. What do you think you could do to address this perception?
Right, so petty crime, there's no such thing as a petty crime. It's as simple as that. There's no such thing as a petty crime. A crime is a crime.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere all of the time, and we can't always do everything for every crime. If we get let's say some criminal damage is committed to a property and there is no witness, no CCTV, no way of identifying someone, it is highly unlikely I'm going to send a police officer to it. We'll record the crime, we'll put the crime onto the system, and we'll ensure that we send out literature, etc. Because even an officer turning up is not going to change the outcome of that, unfortunately. Where there is the potential of a witness, CCTV, a named suspect, or a description of a suspect, a police officer will attend. It's demand at the end of the day. It is about demand, and we can't do absolutely everything that we would love to do. That we often hear that when we had a village bobby, that bobby would know everything, and yes, they probably did know everything, and they probably did know everyone. Unfortunately, policing has changed, communities have changed. It's not as much like that as it used to be. But we now record everything. Back when I started this job 20 years ago, if there was no hope of the crime being solved, it probably wasn't recorded. So now we're more honest. I'm sure Councillor Morris will keep us that way.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Inspector. I just noticed, looking at the figures, that there does seem to be a bit of a drop in the solve rates, which is a little bit concerning. Is there a particular reason for that trend, Chief Inspector?
Right, so solve rates unfortunately do go up and down, which is one of the it's a real frustration. So what we are trying to do is specifically look at different types of outcomes which are not always recorded as a solved rate. So a solve rate's really easy, isn't it? So somebody steals something, I arrest that person, I put them before a court. At that point, it is decided that I've solved the crime. It could go to court and they could be found not guilty, but it's recorded that I've solved the crime. Okay. What we are trying to do is use different types of outcomes through community resolutions, through having victims and suspects sit down and talk to each other, which do not show as the same resolution. Does that make sense?
So none of the restorative justice stuff shows up.
Yeah.
Oh,
so they don't always show as a solved crime in the same way. So although there is a reduction, some of that is due to changes through that. Some of that is we had a really difficult month. So a month ago at Maldon, it showed that we had not solved any domestic abuse cases at standard risk. We put them at standard, medium and high risk. And quite rightly, the Deputy Chief Constable asked me to explain why that had happened. I reviewed the cases and it was right. We hadn't solved any of them and there were good reasons for that. But I also pointed out that Maldon still has the highest solved rate of the whole of Essex. And it was a 1 month blip. So there are blips. In general, particularly around Maldon, we tend to solve far more crimes than we do in other areas of the county. And that's because the community are so much more willing to tell us what's going on. Yeah. And that's what we have to keep pushing and remembering and making sure we are doing the right thing for the community.
Brilliant, thank you. And lastly, you will be relieved to hear. I don't know. I don't know if this is possible. I know we've discussed previously the concerning increase in sexual offences, but also how some of this might in fact be reporting of historical instances. Is there any way of separating out the figures, Chief Inspector, so that we know which is reporting of historical offences and how many are offences that are taking place now? Is that feasible to separate those figures in that way?
Right. So wherever we can put an actual date or a date range in place, that would be recorded historically and would show historically. Unfortunately, with a lot of historical offences, what happens is we just have a range of, how do you put this? I was sexually assaulted during a period of time when I don't remember what that is. So at that point, we have to record it for that year. So certainly because this is something we looked at quite recently, when we look at the offences that have been recorded, unfortunately, offences against children, 22 of the 69 offences that we had, we know were historical. And it does show the figure differently. It does make it look that we've got a worse problem than we have. But unfortunately, right now, there's not a way for us to change that.
I suspected as much. I thought that was probably the case, but thanks ever so much for clarifying that for me. So thank you. Members, does anybody else have any further questions? I think you're off the hook, Spencer and the Chief Inspector. Thank you again very much, and thank you, Inspector Thurston. Also, Damien, thank you for your input tonight. So I think that takes us to the recommendation that we agree to the review and commenting. So members, can we do that by assent to agree to the progress of,
Agreed.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I don't have any other items of business that are urgent. So unless I have forgotten anything, which I'm sure Tara will advise me on if I have, that brings us to the closure of the meeting. So members, officers and guest contributors, thank you very much for your contributions. And I now draw the meeting to a close at 7:43 p.m. As the meeting is now closed, members are advised not to enter into any further discussion on this forum and to please leave the meeting promptly. Thank you and good night.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Good evening.